Thank you very much, Professor Reddy, for inviting me. First of all, I have to give my apologies to you and to all the audience for having been late. I had a meeting with the state government this morning, and somehow I couldn't control the time of that meeting. So I do apologize to you because it is deep discourtesy to you to not be here on time. You have been very lucky to have the opportunity of listening to Professor Srinivasan yesterday and today over these 4 lectures, where he's given you such a broad sweep over the Indian development experience of the last 60 years, basically since independence. I may have various differences with him, but that doesn't alter the fact that this is a really masterful sweep. It's not easy, I can assure you, it's not easy to encapsulate in 4 lectures and capture the key issues, the key developments, the key policy reforms, etc., which have guided our growth and development since independence. And so I do congratulate you, Professor Srinivasan, for this particular feat that you have done. One point I would make, by the way, is that it was your generation who gave us 3% growth. It was our generation who gave you 6% growth of the last 30 years. And I hope your generation will give us 9% growth over the next 30 years. And I think behind that remark really is something very interesting, which is that ever since independence, even 3% growth for the 3.5% growth for the first 30 years was a major departure from almost 0, 1% or something of that order of the previous 50 years, 100 years, something of that order. So one of the very interesting features of our growth process, in some sense, regardless of different policies, different approaches, etc., has been this very consistent increase in growth, particularly since independence, with an interval between around the mid-60s to the late 1970s, when that acceleration did not take place. In fact, it went down somewhat. And to my mind, many of the problems in policy were really issues, policy mistakes, in my view, that were made during that time. And just to give you an illustration of what I mean, many of the regulatory problems that we've had and we've tried to solve in the last 20 years have to do with a number of measures that were introduced during those 15 years, whether it's urban land sealing, the tightening of the MRTP Act, the labor laws, the nationalization of the banking system. One can go through that list, and actually a lot of the problems that we've had did occur, in my view, during that particular period of mid-60s to late 1970s. And to some extent, the process that started in the early 1980s was undoing many of those things. And that process itself took at least 20 years. And I think that itself is a big lesson, that if you make a large policy mistake, it lasts for a long time. And I think that one of the things that we need to recognize in policy making is A, of course, avoid large policy mistakes to the extent you can, and B, to make the system flexible enough that if you do make the policy mistake, you can correct it quickly rather than spending a lot of time doing it. And I think that therefore it's the wide sweep that Professor Srinivasan has done gives us I think a very good introduction to what has happened, but I would urge everyone to reflect more on many of the issues that he has outlined, and think about it in terms of what could have been done, what could be done in the future, etc. I want to confine most of my remarks, the rest of my remarks, to the last couple of years on things that have happened since the global crisis. First, Professor Srinivasan talked about self-congratulation. I think that it would be an error on our part, those of us who were involved in macro management during that period, to do self-congratulation. I think that we can be happy that we did not suffer some of the consequences of what I'm increasingly calling North Atlantic crisis, not the global crisis, and particularly North Atlantic financial crisis, which did have global economic effects, some of which Professor Srinivasan outlined. But I think that it is important to certainly set the record straight, that many people have said that our financial system did not get into trouble. Some people call it a bullock cart financial system. Some said because nothing was happening in the financial system, if obviously you don't get in trouble, etc. There, I think, is very important to set the record straight. First, that between 2004 and 2003 and 2008, we had among the highest credit growths in the world of between 25 to 30% a year, which meant a huge expansion of the banking system. And so it's important to first now understand, number one, that the Indian financial sector was not sitting idle in those days. And actually, at least in our history, it was the fastest period of growth, and even compared to the rest of the world during this period of high financial growth in the world. Second, that also, certainly from our history, that was also the fastest period of economic growth overall. So again, we were not sitting around during that time, not experiencing growth. Third, it was also the period of the fastest opening of the Indian economy to the rest of the world, to the extent that if you take the current account, that is the sum of trade in goods and services, both exports and imports, then actually that sum is now a little over 55%, which is higher than the United States. Indian economy on the current account is more open, Professor Srinivasan, than the United States.